Welcome back to my channel for another Hasselblad episode, and this video is about a purchase I made in the secondary market. I purchased a Hasselblad H6D 100C. On these type of super professional, super expensive cameras, the secondary market is actually a very good source for purchasing gear. So I do not recommend purchasing a camera like this necessarily new, because you get them for a huge discount if you find them in the secondary market. The Hasselblad H6D with the digital back 100C is top notch in photography gear, and it's ranking in the same league as my Phase 1 IQ4, which I use on the bodies XF and XT for the shift functionality. And there is nothing better you can find in the market than a Phase 1 medium format camera or a Hasselblad H6D, period. And clearly there is an alternative here. You could also go for the 400 multi-shot digital back, but I think the 100C is just good enough for me, and I come to the value proposition I found in the secondary market in the course of the video. Let's get started. This camera here with that digital back 100C from Hasselblad usually costs you around $35,000. And my one here, which I purchased in the secondary market, did cost me around $16,000. It came without the 80mm lens, so that's the HC 80mm 2.8, is one of the most shot lenses on the Hasselblad H6D camera body. But that lens cost me only $700 compared to a list price of $3,500. So all in, this was a bargain. Nevertheless, all in super expensive, but I will demonstrate in the course of the video that there is a lot I got for that money. The camera body and the digital back together, without the lens as I said, were sold with a lot of additional accessories. So first of all, I got here in that package the waist level viewfinder, and that's a nice one. And if you have seen my video about the 500 series analog Hasselblad cameras and my shooting experience when I did shoot the CFV 250C, so digital back on these cameras, you saw waist level finder already. This one here is a very nice one and fits perfectly onto the H6D camera body. It also came with a spare battery grip, and here on the camera body, this grip here is actually the battery of the camera, and the grip looks standalone like this. There is a protection here which you can remove, and then you have a charger here. Let me just get this out. So that's the charger which you use with an indication how the charging is progressing, and then you plug it in here. And this one here gets into the wall mount, of course, and then you charge your battery. And with a spare battery, I'm quite well equipped. My first concern was that the batteries might have been used, but they're actually not used. They're like brand new, and their capacity is still fully okay for me. Another accessory contained in the bundle was the tripod quick coupling H. And if you look at that, that's a beautiful piece. And what you also see, it's never been used. So that's the one here. And there are absolutely no traces of use, no signs of use on that one here. It has level metering, absolutely everything you want to wish for. And that in general applies to the whole set. I come to that in a moment, because that camera is kind of brand new. Although I paid significantly less than half of the price tag in the secondary market compared to what I would have paid if I would have ordered this from Hasselblad. When you purchase cameras in the secondary market, it's important that you make sure that you get all the equipment which you need in the bundle. So here, for instance, the protections for the digital back and the camera body, that's all in different adapters. I don't show them all, for power and charging. Another protection plate here, cable for tethering, for instance. Here all the protections and the lens cap for this 80mm lens and for the camera body on the camera lens mount. Another cable which you have here. There is even the original from 6 years back Hasselblad USB stick contained here with the focus software and the manuals. And that is a nice USB stick, of course. Almost looks a little bit like vintage, but I think they sell them today in exactly the same format. Another protection plate here. More adapters, and by the way here, let's get this adapter out of the way. Here is a remote release cable which was included. Even a Hasselblad lens towel to clean the lenses and to clean the camera. So quite nice. Also certificates here with a warranty. It's all contained, all the paper. It's a full package. The only thing that's missing is the original box in which it was shipped. But if you think about it, around $35,000 if you purchase it from Hasselblad, or around $15,000 to $16,000 if you purchase it second hand, and if it is in that condition, like I'm going to show in a moment, is really a good deal. So I'm quite happy about that, and I also will outline my reasons why I purchased this camera in the course of the video, of course. Now I'm going to clean up the mess here. We focus on the camera and the lens, and I'll discuss quickly why this H6D 100C is such an attractive and desirable piece of photographic technology for me. Now that I have cleaned up the mess in front of me on the table, we can actually focus on the camera and the digital back. And the digital back can be unmounted. There is a little button here or a lever. I turn it, I push it, and then I can unmount the digital back. And first of all, I applied here a sticker against fingerprints, but the condition of this digital back is like brand new. There are absolutely no signs of use on this digital back here. Even at the bottom, if you look at that, it looks perfect. And the sensor inside is the largest electronic sensor or digital sensor you can have on the camera market. It's the same size as the Phase 1 IQ4, for instance, and the dimensions are 53.4 millimeter times 40 millimeter. So based on these dimensions, this sensor is significantly larger than the full frame sensor. It's about a ratio of 2.5 in terms of area, and is also significantly larger than the crop medium format sensor you have in the Hasselblad X system, like the X1D, X1D Mark II, or the digital back CFV250C, and also significantly larger than what you get in a Fuji GFX camera. And that is clearly the best you can get in digital imaging today. Before I mount my digital back to the camera body, let's have a look at the camera body itself. And this is the same as what you saw on the digital back. No signs of use. This is absolutely brand new. This guy who owned it before, there was one pre-owner, he didn't even shoot that camera. And I come to the releases in a moment this camera body has. So quite nice, even inside, if you look here, no signs of use at all. So this is like brand new, as if I would have ordered it directly from Hasselblad in Sweden. When I got the camera just a couple of days ago, I cleaned the sensor. I also looked at the sensor in detail to see if there are any scratches. But that sensor is like brand new. So let's apply the digital back to the camera body, and then let's go into further details on this camera system here. So we do this very gentle again. When you applied it, again, make sure you rotate that button, push it so that it snaps on, because I really don't want to waste the mechanics of this almost brand new but used H6D 100C. Here on the side is actually the unmount button for lenses. So if I push that, I can unmount the lens, and then you see the mirror inside of the camera body here. Let me try to rotate this a little bit so you can see it. And also on the lens mount, no signs of use. So I'm such a lucky person that I found this camera for that price tag in the secondary market. Switching the camera on works via that button here, and I just did it. And you have a top display, or how Hasselblad is calling it, the grip display. And you have the back display on the digital back. And the menu system and the handling is very familiar to me, because I use the X1D2 from Hasselblad a lot, and it's almost the same. You can swipe down, you can swipe up, you have your settings here for camera and all of that. It's all working in the same way as what you know from the Hasselblad X system, and in this way I could use it immediately out of the box. One tiny little detail on this camera body really made me smile. If you think back about DSLRs or system cameras, let's go back by 10 years. They very often had a tiny little flash integrated in the camera body, and that is something that completely vanished in the semi-professional and the professional segment. But this camera, super expensive, super professional, still has it, because here you have a button. If I push that, a tiny little flash pops out of the camera body, and it's actually quite nice to have that at hand, because in some situations that might just be enough additional light to get a shot or a portrait done. At the top of the camera, we have an optical viewfinder, and it is a very bright, a very good viewfinder. I liked a lot when I took my first sample images with that camera to use that viewfinder. You can also unmount it. There is a button here, and you see also here That optical viewfinder has no traces of use, no signs of use. It's like brand new. And also inside, if you look at the glass here, all perfect. Absolutely nothing I can complain about, like out of a freshly shipped box from Hasselblad in Sweden. The camera body is a pleasure to shoot because there are many buttons and elements which you can use without being required to go through the digital menu system here on the touchscreen. And by the way, it is a touchscreen, so if I want to change here something like metering, I can just do this by touch, so no problem at all. But you also have a lot of dedicated buttons here, which makes this camera easy to operate and actually very flexible in a live shooting. For instance, exposure compensation, exposure mode. If I push that button, let's just have a look at the top display here. Let me push it. Then you can choose between fully manual, aperture priority, shutter speed priority, program mode. There's even an automatic mode on that camera here, which is quite unusual for a professional instrument like this. You have lots of buttons here. Auto exposure lock, for instance. And then there's an element I want to cover in a bit more detail, which is called true focus, and which is really useful. You have white balance here, you have autofocus settings, what have you. Let's get the exposure mode setting back. So for instance, if I push this button here on ISO, you see I can choose my ISO, and if I push it again, it goes away. But I can also switch between continuous and single shooting if I push and hold it, and then it changes here a symbol. So there is a double functionality on these buttons. I like a lot working with that camera. I'm super excited about it. We also have all kinds of ports, flash sync, what have you. You have here a protective bottom plate, which you can remove. There is a little lever here. If you push that, you can remove it. And that protects the tripod mount in 2 different sizes here, which is also quite nice. All in a truly professional instrument. And in particular, what I'm going to use it for is for portraits and sometimes for landscape. You have here all types of connections. So for instance, headphone, microphone, HDMI. You can really use this camera in all kinds of ways. You have a hot shoe here, which you can use. There is still the protector on it. Again, admire with me how this camera is free of any signs of use, and is clearly something I will use a lot going forward for beauty and fashion. The sensor, which you saw when I unmounted the digital back, is a CMOS sensor, 100 megapixel of resolution. As I said before, the largest digital camera sensor you can get in the market, 53.4 millimeter times 40 millimeter. And the resolution then boils down to 11.6K times 8.7K. So huge reserves for cropping in if you want to do so. The sensor has 16-bit and the dynamic range approximates to 15 full stops. So that's the best you can currently get in the market when it comes to dynamic range. ISO goes up to 12,800 and starts at 64. That's the base ISO. And you have, of course, this beautiful color signs coming from Hasselblad, which I mentioned many times when I talked about the X1D Mark II or the 907X camera system. There is a card slot door here in the same place actually as you have it on the CFV250C, and there are 2 cards in it. There is a compact flash card which you need for 4K raw video. I have a very fast one in here, 256 gigabyte, 540 megabyte per second, and that is the first card you need to use here. And then you have a second card, which is an SD card. And you can also choose in the menu whether you want to have this as a rollover or you want to have it as a backup. It's very convenient to customize this in the menu system of the digital bag. The compact flash card is actually a CFast card, and I use this SanDisk reader here to carry images over to my MacBook Pro. Works quite nice. The shutter speed range is from 60 minutes in the longest setting down to 1/2000 seconds, but be careful if you purchase lenses from the HC system in the secondary market, because this one here is an older HC 80mm f2.8, and that is only working as fast as 1/800 seconds, and you cannot update the firmware in these lenses. So you need a newer lens with a newer firmware to follow the firmware updates Hasselblad is posting. So here be careful, but 1/800 seconds for a $700 lens is good enough for me for the time being. This camera can shoot UHD, so 4K RAW, and that is actually very exceptional for a medium format camera, although by now the Fuji GFX system can do that in some of the cameras, and the Leica S3 can do it. But this is really an exceptional quality setting you can do on video in comparison to 1080p, which works on that camera. Having said that, based on the autofocus system, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this camera for video with a lot of action. It's really more for these type of fine art videography, which you might want to do on a sensor of this size here. The weight of the whole camera system, including the digital back, the camera body and the HC 80mm, which is the standard lens for this camera body, is 2105 gram, and that includes the battery and the cards here. File size of raw images coming out of that camera here is huge. We talk about give or take 200 to 300 megabyte per file, and that for some people of course is a no-go. For me it's not a problem because I work on the fastest MacBook Pro currently available with an 8 terabyte SSD, so I have plenty of storage. I can also always go for external hard drives in the SSD space, and I'd rather have reserves on resolution and quality than finding out later that I would have wanted to have a bit more quality. So for me it's fine. You can always crop in, you can always size it down, you can compress it, what have you. Coming to autofocus on medium format camera systems, that is a bit of a delicate topic. And let's look into the competitor space first. So on the Phase 1 and the IQ4, so let's talk about the XF body. You have just one cross sensor in the middle for autofocus, and that is all you have. But there is focus correction, I come to that in a moment, which Hasselblad calls true focus, and you have a dedicated button here. On the Leica S3, which some people consider the medium format camera system from Leica, the top-notch camera system they offer, is actually in Leica terminology the Leica Pro format and not a true medium format. You also have only one cross sensor sitting in the middle and being in charge of autofocus. And the same applies here to the H6D. There is only one cross sensor in the center, and that cross sensor is used for focusing. But thanks to the Hasselblad engineers, there is a mechanism called true focus, and that is what I'm going to talk about in the next couple of minutes. What you see now is a look through the optical viewfinder, and you see indicated in the center that cross sensor. You also see a green illuminated display below the viewfinder here, and I can now focus. You see some animation here in that green display, which indicates to me that I have true focus activated. And now let's discuss what this is really doing. And it's super convenient and something I miss actually in the Leica S3. What true focus, which you can enable here on the button, but also in the menu, is doing for you is the following. If you take a portrait, you have only that one autofocus sensor in the center of the frame. So you focus on the eye of the model, you half press the shutter button and keep it half pressed, but then you recompose. You might want to go back a little bit, you might want to have a different angle of the camera, and true focus is permanently calculating based on the sensors in the camera what correction needs to be applied to keep the focus on the eye despite you have recomposed. You have it typically in medium format camera systems, only that one center focus point, but you can focus on the eye of the model, you recompose, and the algorithm implemented in the camera calculates for you in a way the true focus that it's still sitting pinpoint sharp on the eye. And I like that a lot. It's a great innovation, and it actually takes away the pain if you think about and contemplate that you have only one central focus point in these type of cameras. Since there is a mirror construction in that camera body, the shutter sound sounds like in good old times. Let's hear this. Very nice. How nice is that? I like it a lot, and since this camera is almost brand new, I come to that as one of my last points before I conclude the video. This is just terrific, again, that you find these type of cameras in the secondary market for such a competitive price tag. To give you one more impression from the shutter sound, let's take an image. So I take this up to my eye here. I focus on my model from The Witcher. Let's take the shot. Wonderful. And then we get a preview here, which I'm going to show. And if you show it the preview, you can zoom in and you get a pinpoint sharp image. It will never be fully rendered because the JPEGs used for preview, and which you can choose in the menu. So you can choose whether you want to have this in RAW only or in RAW and JPEG. That JPEG image has not the full resolution. So you really need to go for the raw image, and then later post-process in Adobe or in the focus software from Hasselblad or in Capture One. But you see this is pinpoint sharp and huge resolution. So quite nice. And as I said at the beginning of the video, I have not yet had the pleasure to shoot this camera really out in the field, but I will, because this is not a pure studio camera. You can shoot it on street, you can shoot it for portraits in the city, what have you. You can shoot it for landscape out there in the mountains. And I will come back with a video explaining my shooting experience, demonstrating images and the huge quality of images you get out of that. And in this way provide more data points on that H6D 100C. The last point I wanted to make is if I go here into the menu and I go on the settings and I go to about, then here you actually get the usage button. And if you push that usage button, you see the body has shot 66 shots only. So this is confirming what I said before. This camera body is brand new and I'm so happy and so lucky that I found it in the secondary market. The lens is the opposite, 14,261 shots. And I guess in the course of the next 1 or 2 years, I will order new HC 80mm f2.8 because that clearly is the lens to go for on that camera body here. That's actually all I wanted to say and show on my secondary market purchase of the H6D 100C. And besides the many good things you get with this camera system, what I really like and find fascinating, because I'm missing it on the Leica S3, is the true focus setting here, which I demonstrated before in the video. And that really works. I tried it with one person here already, and you see that the focus is sitting on the eye and that the blurriness in the background is what it's supposed to be. And here's another image I took actually at home when I played with the camera, and you see here a true medium format look. And I know medium format look is something which many people question whether it really exists. I'm going to do in the next weeks or month a fully fledged video on medium format look and what it really is and what it means, what it has to do with dynamic range, you know, with the transitions between sharp areas of the image and soft areas of the image, and with the overall image impression and effect an image has on you if you look at it. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me your thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel, there's always more to come. Thanks for watching, stay safe and healthy, and of course, peace out.